So, welcome everyone to the latest podcast on Feel Good, Do Good Work. This is our series where we look at well-being and employee engagement in the workplace. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Leigh Cowlishaw, who is owner of Balancing Edges and also a mental health first aider, working primarily in the events and meetings sector, which she's done for many, many years. And actually, Leigh is joining us during what is National Stress Awareness Week. Although for you listening, it may be that you listen to this after that week, but it's very topical and great to have Leigh on the podcast. Welcome, Leigh.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. Well, I understand you're very passionate about well-being and mental well-being. And that you've been championing this across the events and meeting sector. So I just really wanted to understand a little bit more about that and why you got into it for the benefit of our listeners, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2018, I became a mental health first aider after a 2-day course in Bristol. I remember it so well. And during that course, I really kind of opened up to myself and really kind of understood a little bit more about myself and where I was within my role, where I was within balancing that with my family. I left the course and I just felt that I really needed to make some fundamental changes to my life. I didn't feel that I was necessarily heading for a burnout or I was stressed, but I definitely felt that I needed to make some changes to my lifestyle. So I did. I left my role. I loved my job at the time. I loved my team. Really successful, but I just decided that it was time for me to make some changes. So I left my business, the business I was working in, and kind of started up on my own in terms of working for myself, but still having a really big hand in mental health and well-being. And I felt it was just so important for me to claw back a bit of time for me and for me to be more in control of my own kind of work-life balance.
Yeah, fantastic. So, and so that's it's almost a personal purpose, really, isn't it? And but you've done that within the events and meeting sector. So how has that support that you've been building up manifested? How have you done that?
Yeah, so I work across venues and agencies. So looking at what they're doing in terms of their approach in employee engagement, but also I've been doing talks on mental health and wellbeing in the sector. As we know, within this sector, it can be very high pressured, very stressful. So looking at ways in which to alleviate that stress, but also just to take that consideration of myself and people I'm working with. So whether that's looking at stress buckets, whether that's looking at toolkits, being able to provide support, signposting, and really taking an interest in how mental health and well-being should be the core of everything that we do within a workplace. It shouldn't just be a tick box exercise. It absolutely should be practicing processes throughout organizations.
That's fantastic. I mean, I've done quite a bit of work within the events industry myself over the years, and you're right, it is very high pressured. And to be fair, I think probably people that work in that area like to have that fast moving pace, but it is easy to burn out, really. I mean, physically and mentally, isn't it? So
it really is.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And because often it's more than one event on the go. It can be more than one event in a week. It could be in many, many different locations. So there's the travel aspect of it, the complexities. How would you say having this focus has made a difference within the sector? How's it been received?
It was very well received. I remember very strongly my first kind of industry talk. I attended a meeting at the HBAA back in November 2018, which obviously is just over 2 years ago. And I was talking about kind of mental health, and it was when people were starting to talk about it more and more. It wasn't on the cusp of, absolutely being very open about it. And I stood up at their members meeting, and there must have been about 130, 140 people in the audience. And I kind of shared that people knew me as this person. They knew me as a leader, a person on a panel. They knew me as somebody that I did a lot of blogs, I did a lot of industry speaking, I led the association, I had a very big role, I had a big team, and I shared all the things that they knew me as, that person that was stood on the stage at that point. But then I also shared the side that they didn't know about me, that I'm a mum, I've got 2 children, I'm a carer. I felt anxious about being on that stage, that I felt quite stressed in my role at that time, that I needed to make some changes. And because I didn't bare my soul, but because I was incredibly honest with people about how I was feeling at that point, the reaction was incredible. That people actually could relate to me. There was people crying in the audience because they could relate to how I was feeling, but also it kind of gave them the green light for them to say, do you know
Yeah.
what, I'm feeling like this as well, or
Yeah.
that's how I've been feeling, or I felt like that. I didn't know whether it was okay to talk about it. And from that moment onwards, I knew that we'd kind of lifted up a stone that we needed to keep lifting, and
Yeah.
then we didn't want to put back down, because ultimately people were starting to then be more true to themselves. And in an industry, as we talked about, where it's very high pressured, it was absolutely needed. And since that, really started to champion what that means to people, and giving people the opportunity to say it really is okay not to be okay.
Yeah, because you'd given yourself permission to be vulnerable, and you'd given them permission
Mm.
to be vulnerable as well.
Yeah, it was like I'd given them the opportunity to come inside of how I was feeling, and as I said, they'd never seen me as that person before, and to show, I didn't bare my soul on the stage, but I definitely was vulnerable, and I was able to show them that, I'm the same as everybody else. I go through the same emotions. I have the same, I will have emotional triggers. I will have things that I can't deal with on that day, but actually it put me, we were all on the same level playing field, and it was an incredible reaction to it, and something that I will never forget.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. And sometimes people have, those pivotal moments where they're listening to a talk and they think from that moment on, a little bit like you with the training course that you did, that was a real trigger for you that sent you
Yeah.
down a different path. And possibly in what you did there, you were the catalyst for somebody else to make a change.
Yeah.
Just thinking about how that links back to employee engagement.
Yeah.
So you're looking at providing toolkits and resources and a safe space to talk. So
Yeah.
what kinds of things have you provided to people, and what have you noticed in terms of the benefits to employee engagement as a result?
Sure. So after that, and again working with the association, I encouraged, and we agreed as a board initiative, that we would work and champion mental health across HBAA, which also looked across the industry. So we provided toolkits such as wellness action plans, um, access to resources that they may not have known before. We provided mental health first aid training. I actually ran a mental health awareness event in May 2019, where we had guest speakers to come along and talk about their experiences. And again, it gave people the platform and the opportunity to listen to experts, B, to have their own resources, and C, recognize in themselves, and start to recognize not just in themselves but also in their businesses, of what it is needed for people to support their own mental health. So whether that is toolkit access, working with extended companies such as Eventwell that have extensive knowledge. They also have the manifesto, being able to provide that to people for them to not just sign up to, but as part of a belonging, and actually implement that in their businesses. Because as I mentioned earlier, sometimes mental health and well-being in some businesses can be seen as a tick box exercise, but as we know, it needs to be far greater than that, that people feel as part of their culture, and from the top down, that people believe that mental health is so important to employee engagement. It's so important to resilience with an individual, and also productivity. As our biggest assets of people, we really do need to make sure we look after them, and throughout all the times that they see, and especially at the moment in the challenging situation we're in, mental health, how people are suffering at the moment. It's never been so prevalent to have these types of activities, the support, the open door policy, the opportunity for people just to outline actually not feeling that great at the moment, and having the know-how of how to access toolkits, who to go to, and how they can, reach out for support when they need to.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's when you've been in the industry for such a long time,
Mm,
it's such a shame and a tragedy, isn't it, that this is happening now. I mean, in
it's
so many
horrendous.
ways, obviously, for a very fundamental level, losing people, that is the
Yeah,
worst thing of all. And then it's not far behind when you start to think of a livelihood, a profession, and for some people, identity. It's who they are and
yeah.
everything they've known, and so many years doing it. um what's your take on let's imagine and fast forward to a point where we've got the virus under control through whatever
Mm,
means that is, whether it's treatment or whether it's a vaccine, and the events industry starts to recover in some way. What do
mm.
you think the sort of impact of this is going to be, and how we can best protect people working in that environment?
Yeah, well, a couple of things there. First is that, from the offset when we watched Boris back in many, many months ago, which quite frankly feels like many, many years
Yeah,
ago
doesn't
now,
it?
when we when we went to the first lockdown, he said, we need to wash hands, stay at home, protect the NHS.
Yes.
The first one, wash hands, the mental health impact to this pandemic is far greater than washing our hands. And that for me was my take on it from the offset, was that washing hands absolutely was about, keeping the virus under under control to a certain degree, but obviously protecting ourselves. There was no access there in terms of what it will do to mental health. And as this has evolved and gone on longer than probably what any of us ever anticipated, you'll start to see the government now talking more about, go out for your mental health, make sure you go to your appointments. So even they are recognizing the impact that this is going to have on mental health. And, there was no winners in this. So whether you're furloughed, whether you're made redundant, whether you've worked all the way through it, whether you've been part-time furloughed, everybody will have struggles. Even if they don't recognize the signs, there are struggles. And I'm open to admit that days I have had terrible struggles just with where I'm at in terms of my work, or speaking to other people, where you have a phone call and you say to naturally, how are you doing? And you go into somebody will go into a massive long discussion about, they're not great, or their family member's not great. So all the time you're up and down in a roller coaster every day in a situation. And the impact on mental health for this industry and other industries as well is going to be catastrophic, unfortunately. And that's why we need to be true to ourselves. We need to be reaching out for support. And it's never been so important for businesses to really be taking such a strong approach to supporting on mental health and well-being, because ultimately our people are our biggest assets, as I mentioned earlier. But also, to aid recovery of businesses, they're going to need people that are able to support them, that are able to be able to maintain and sustain this, because it's going to be a long recovery. It's not going to be something that even if we get a vaccine tonight, which we won't do. I mean, they're talking about rapid testing coming out imminently, but in terms of vaccine, who knows when that's going to be. The impact and the knock-on effect into mental health and people is going to be far longer than that. And this is a marathon, not a sprint, and we need to give ourselves every opportunity to support each other, to have the right resource, to look at our nutrition, to look at our sleep, look at our water intake, and really to take that care of ourselves, because this is going to be a long road of even recovery, beyond recovery. It's a long road ahead of us, and we need to be well equipped to deal with that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And certainly within our book, Feel Good, Do Good Work, we talk a lot about the holistic view of good nutrition and sleep being so critical. It
Yeah,
just is. It sounds like a really basic thing to say, like hydrate more, but honestly, I mean, you in a dehydrated state, you lack focus. You're less productive. It affects your
yeah,
mood. like you were saying about sort of going out and taking exercise as well.
Hmm.
And also I think it's allowing yourself to give yourself the investment of those things. That the whole thing about I'm too busy to do any of that, it feels like a bit of a false economy. And
Yeah,
you know, because you will be less productive if you're not eating properly, sleeping properly, hydrating properly, and even taking time out to do something totally different, you know, connecting with friends, giving back. And I think the other side of it is as well is the degree to which you feel connected to the organization you work for.
yeah,
You mentioned belonging, and that's such an important thing, isn't it, to feel that you belong somewhere that resonates with you, where you've got shared values, and that they've got your back through this as
yeah,
well, which is just so
absolutely.
cool.
It's so important. I mean, I have to say the Headspace app has become my best friend through this
Yes,
period.
yeah,
At least every night I fall asleep to it. If I wake up in the night worrying or thinking about work or thinking about anything, I put my AirPods in, and again I will then listen to Headspace, which helps me go back to sleep. It has, everybody has a different friend through this. Headspace was mine. I have to say, in the beginning, I felt a couple of pints of beer a night was my best friend, but as the time got on longer, I was like, well, I can't continue with this. I need to kind
no,
of look at something different. It sounded great in the beginning that I didn't have to drive anywhere, but actually, when you start to do it on a nightly basis, it was like, oh no, I need to stop
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Um,
It was such a surreal time though, wasn't it, Leigh? I mean,
mm,
it's you know, some, I think for some, you know, one day blended into another. It
it
felt
did.
like just a very unusual, and one could argue as we go into lockdown 2 today, in England, that we've got some sense of what to do. Hopefully we can think back to what we did in lockdown 1, try and apply some of our strategies, you know, to
Yeah,
take on board the things that people have shared over the summer as to how they got through it.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm determined in lockdown 2, starting today, that I am going to treat it in a very positive and a very different way in terms of I want to do something different, or I want to learn a new skill. And I know that there was like a big craze in lockdown 1 where people were doing a lot of baking, or they were doing a lot of courses. Personally, I didn't do any of that, but I am going to use this in a more of a positive state, whether it's reading, doing something that I can look back and say, okay, I did use that time to do this. And it's not that I'm going to force myself. I naturally want to do that. I
Yeah,
naturally want to make a change and to do something different as well. And I think it's different as well with the light. I'm sitting in my lounge at the moment and it's dark outside.
yeah,
When we had lockdown 1, we'd be sat outside playing cards and doing
yes.
things differently. We don't have that now.
We don't, but I agree with you. I mean, I tend to be someone that tries to look on the bright side and think, well, you know, this is a period of time I can be, you know, doing X, Y, Z. But the positives about this time of the year, from my perspective, are that, you know, you've got hopefully you're in a warm and cozy environment, which is quite
Yeah.
nice. It's almost the time of year where we slightly hibernate. You've got
Hmm.
different kinds of foods that are available seasonally. It's much more about stews and soups and
Mm,
foods and things like that. You know, if you're lucky enough to have an open fire, it's about lighting fires, you know, and like you say, reading good books. So I suppose
yeah.
looking at what the environment, where the environment guides you to go, and just embrace it. You can have lovely sunny days through winter as well,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
crisp beautiful weather. You know, October, you know, to be fair, has been not that, but you know, you take the rough with the smooth, I think. So that I think there are some things to be optimistic about. And to your point about finding something to focus on, that comes down to having something you can control in a
Hmm.
situation where there are so many things you can't control.
Yeah, I totally agree. I look forward to, as little as it sounds, but I look forward to lighting a candle in the evening,
Yeah.
and putting on, just putting on nice scents in the lounge,
Yes.
and just, it's a very hearty time, as you said. Stews, home, slow cookers. It's that sort of
Yeah.
period where it is you feel quite cozy in your own environment,
Yeah.
and it's just taking advantage of that and just I think this time for me is a time to just again reset and
Yes.
pause,
Yeah.
because lockdown 1 was kind of the unknown, and
Yeah.
then it's gone on and on and on. We've gone through such a bumpy road between that and now. Obviously, a government announcement today in terms of extension of furlough
Yes.
changes some for some people. but
Yeah.
it is also the time just to pause and get ready for 2021 and whatever that brings.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you're fortunate in the industry you work in particular, that it's characterized by people who are resilient, hardworking,
Yeah,
resourceful, and even though it's so heartbreakingly tough, rather like it is in the arts and leisure sector as
yeah,
well, heartbreakingly tough for these highly talented people, you can be encouraged, I think, to think that they'll come back and they'll find some way. And even now, events organizations are adapting, aren't they? They're pivoting, they're adapting,
absolutely.
they're
Yeah,
coming.
absolutely.
Some things are being accelerated, really, the move to sort of online and virtual. And
Hmm.
I'm sure we won't lose the face-to-face aspects of events altogether, but
No.
we are living in an increasingly digital world, aren't we? So I suppose it's accelerating
Yeah.
things like the response to climate change. These things have been pushed forward a bit more, haven't they?
Yeah, I think there are things that will change forever in this industry. I don't know what they are, but I think there is definitely room for virtual, hybrid, as well as you say, face to face, shoulder to shoulder. I mean, looking back to 9/11, the airline industry changed forever there, where you're not allowed to take on liquids over 100 mil. It's now way of life.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
That's a really good. That's a very good perspective if you look at
Mm,
that. So yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a shock to the system, but
It really is, and it's adapting, and people are reskilling, retraining, and that helps with mental health as well, because you have a sense of purpose, sense of
yeah,
belonging, but you're actually developing yourself. So all of these things are positive mindset and changing your outlook on things. If you've always done things a certain way, now's the opportunity to be like looking at different skills, but just retraining the brain, they say as well. You're never too old to retrain the brain.
no, I mean that look at Madonna. How many times has she reinvented herself?
I
You know,
know. I know.
it's that's there's a skill there. Well,
Yeah,
Leigh,
absolutely.
thank you ever so much for joining us on the podcast today. I think that was really fascinating and really encouraging for people to think about things through the lens of mental health first aid and
Mhm.
looking after your own well-being. So much appreciated. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to speaking to you again.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.